But you have to also appreciate what democracy really means here. Democracy is not all rainbows and butterflies. As you democratize society, move it away from elitism and authoritarianism, what happens is counterintuitive things happen. Fragmentation happens. So ironically, when a dictator comes to power in ancient Rome, like Augustus, one of the first Roman emperors, one of the most effective Roman emperors, because he was so managerial and so controlling, also a brilliant strategist. So as that, the emperor, what does the emperor do? The emperor unifies, like I said. Unifies, gives a coherent vision and a singular sense of direction. This can be very, very powerful because you can effectively get a lot of stuff done. You can build temples and win wars and build cities. But also, if that vision is wrong, it can go south very quickly too. So there's a devilish sword there. But as more and more people become educated, we all become more developed, democratized. Power goes away from the emperor and gets distributed to ordinary people. That means ordinary people like you and me, who are not kings or politicians or aristocrats, we get more ability to control our own lives. We can be more creative, we can be more autonomous, we can travel more, we can spend our money more, we have more money to spend, and so on. But as that happens, each of us now becomes like our own little mini tyrant. It doesn't automatically solve the problem. In fact, what it does is it sort of fractures society. Society now breaks apart into factions. When you don't have one strong force to unite people together, sometimes through vicious force. When you don't have that, people will naturally tend to break apart into cliques and factions that then start to fight with each other. This becomes quite wasteful in terms of wasting a lot of energy. And we're seeing this today with American politics. Back in the 1950s and 60s, one of the things that made America great back then, in a sense, that America was predominantly spiral dynamic stage blue. America was unified by a certain culture of Judeo-Christian values, many of the conservative values that conservatives pine for today. The whole appeal of Trump's, Make America Great Again, this idea of going back to the 1950s and 60s, where America was simpler, it was more white, it was more Protestant, Judeo-Christian. There wasn't so much political turmoil. There wasn't this rank partisanship that we have today. In a sense, there's some truth to that. And the reason that was because we were at spiral dynamic stage blue back then, for the most part. Which means that we were more unified by a single religion, a single set of values, which kind of shaped our sense as a nation, as a civilization. We were very nationalist. So when we were fighting off enemies like Nazi Germany or communist Russia or communist China or communist Korea, something like this, or communist Vietnam, you see, we had outside enemies and we kind of rallied together as Americans under sort of a cohesive idea of, maybe it's American patriotism, the founding father, whatever is the American narrative. So we sort of came together under that. We all sort of agreed on that. And we were actually able to be quite effective. But then what happened was that after that, the democratization continued. And we started moving beyond spiral dynamic stage blue into orange. Orange is more business-oriented, more individualistic. The spiral dynamics pendulum swings. If you watch my spiral dynamics series, it swings from individualist stages to collectivist stages back to individualist stages. So stage blue was the 1950s and 60s, was a collectivist stage, which many conservatives don't understand today. Because many conservatives today are actually in stage orange, which is individualistic. And they think that, everybody was individualistic back during the World War II era. No, they were very collectivist. In a sense, individualism was very suppressed during the 1950s and 60s. There was more of a sense of America as a sort of a higher identity that all of us subsumed ourselves to. But then the pendulum swung after that. With the baby boomer generation, the pendulum started swinging more towards individualism. There was the rise of consumerism, the rise of marketing that appealed to every individual consumer, the rise of technology, the rise of luxury. And then also what opened up after the 60s is with the counterculture revolution, the hippie psychedelic revolution of the 1960s, which is very, very significant. I'll talk about that in a separate episode, the significance of the psychedelic revolution of the 60s. That opened up stage green. So you see, as we move higher up the spiral, as we develop more, as we become more democratic, what that means is that opens up more room for voices, suppressed and marginalized voices to come to power and to speak their truths and to put forth their survival agenda. So as we bring more people into the melting pot and give them a voice, now we have to start to listen to their voice. So, you bring in women, now you have to listen to women. You bring in blacks, now you have to listen to blacks. You bring in Asians, now you have to listen to Asians. You bring in gay people, you have to listen to gay people, and you have to treat them all as equal to your own, if you're white. Now you say, well, that's great. It is great, but it also comes with problems. Because now you have to spend a lot more time listening to different perspectives and voices. And now the unified monoculture that used to exist in America or in other countries, it starts to crumble and fragment. What was once unified under a great pressure, now when the pressure has been removed, it starts to slack and fall apart and break apart into fragments, to disintegrate. And that is, in a sense, what we're experiencing now in the last, let's say, 10 or 20 years of American society. We're starting to experience this sort of disintegration. Different stages on the spiral are starting to fight with each other because now we're not all predominantly a sage blue. Now maybe a third of us are at blue, a third of us are at orange, and a third of us are at green. Now we're pulling in three separate directions. Now, with the rise of the internet, information has become democratized. The news media is becoming democratized. Whereas 30, 40 years ago, you had a couple of cable news shows on TV that everybody listened to and everybody got their information from. And everybody agreed, when some, Walter Cronkite or somebody on the evening news came on, everybody watched him. Everybody thought he was a decent guy. Everybody just listened to what he said about Vietnam or about the Soviets or whatever, the communists, whatever, and everybody agreed. And that was actually a unifying force for the whole country. But what's happened since then is we don't have a couple of cable channels, we have hundreds of cable channels. Now we have not just TV, we have radio, we have satellite radio, we have podcasts, we have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have online blogs and websites and whatever you want. You can go start a blog, a website, a podcast, start talking and preaching about your religion, your philosophy, your ideology, your latest conspiracy theory, your opinion, your criticism of the news, your criticism of elites, and so forth. So this is a democratization of information and media. But the problem is when you have a bunch of ignorant people and you start to give them power, you can't just assume that that's automatically a good thing. It's like giving power to children. And in a sense, that's what's happening today. So one of the reasons that we're seeing a bit of a backlash and a bit of some of the negative effects of this democratization, because you would think like, well, Leo, the way you've been describing it up to now, everything should be hunky-dory and peachy and positive. We shouldn't be seeing all this strife and conflict. But actually, no, that's exactly what you should be seeing is strife and conflict as democracy increases, at least for now, temporarily. You should be seeing more conflict because people are getting a sense of their own power, but they haven't really developed a responsible relationship with this power yet. They don't know how to use it responsibly.